Hello, my name is Duncan Green, and this is a video in the series of LSE Introductions to Influencing. I want to talk here about a particular model for understanding power from a friend of mine, Rowlands, who came up with what I think is both a simple and very useful way of understanding power that's particularly relevant to grassroots organizing and activism. So this video will try and explain what it gives you and how you use that model as a planning tool. So Jo based her thinking on her PhD and a subsequent book she wrote for Oxfam on women in Honduras. It's still on the Oxfam website, so I urge you, if you're interested in her work, do go and take a look. But she drew some much broader understanding and thinking out of that work. As with many other power frameworks, the essence of the Four Powers framework is identifying different kinds of power that operate at different levels. So for Rowlands, there is power within. That is the world of social norms, of thinking of whether you feel that you are entitled to have an opinion, to act, to resist, or whether you feel that actually you have no rights at all. In that world, there is a lot of activism to be done around shifting norms of what is acceptable. And a lot of this work comes down to feminism and work on gender rights and women's empowerment. And the ways you do that are things like popular education, awareness raising, and storytelling. So that creates the light bulb moment when people who previously thought they had no rights or no entitlements suddenly say, no, hold on a minute. My husband has no right to beat me. The cop has no right to demand a bribe. I am a person. When that happens, they often look around and they find people in similar situations, and quite spontaneously, people start coming together in social organizations and mobilizing, building coalitions. And that becomes more elaborate and less spontaneous and more structured as you go further up into bigger and bigger units. But there is an aspect there of power with, that we are stronger together than individually, and people who've got a sense of power, they want to make a difference, they want to bring about change, they start to organize between each other. One of the aims they want to achieve by creating power with is to influence through power to change the law, power to change what government does, power to change how people think. And that can be done through speaking out, through lobbying, through insider processes, or through outside protest, through media, through research, many different ways to actually exert power over the wider system. And then when organizations and institutions actually acquire the levers of formal power in the state or in the military, then they can have power over, where they can actually tell people what to do. Now, how I describe that sounds like a sequence, but it's not. Actually, many of these things go on in different orders and simultaneously, but that essential division of thinking about, is this a power within issue, a power with issue, or a power to issue, or a power over issue, is really useful for activists and helps you understand your strategy and how you can design your strategy. I think it's probably one of the most practical of the power tools. So in using the Four Powers model as a planning tool, you look around and you see what are the current strengths and obstacles to power within. Many activists start with nothing about us without us, thinking, what is the position of the people who we are trying to help? What are the normative obstacles to them achieving what they want to achieve? What could we do to help them build that sense of power within? And then, how do you build power with? What is the state of organization? It's not that, no one has ever thought of this before. So you need to understand how people have organized in the past, what's worked, what has not worked, how they're organized now, what sort of organizations have emerged, and then how can you help them strengthen that, build those coalitions, build that power with. A lot of work, especially on the sort of the donor end or the insider end of the aid spectrum, is supporting allies to exert power too. How good is them? You find these allies, these local NGOs, local CSOs, local organizations, think tanks. How experienced are they? How capable are they of exerting power over the wider system? How can we help? Do they need some training? Do they need to have peer-to-peer conversations with people who are doing this, working on the same issue? How can we strengthen that power too? And then in terms of power over of allies or opponents, should we aim to strengthen the allies? Should we aim to weaken the opponents? And if so, how are we going to do that? I want to illustrate the Rowlands power framework with a story from India. This is from the Bundelkhand, about 6 hours drive away from Delhi, a place where for centuries local fishing communities have fished these artificial ponds, and they were lower caste communities scraping a living. A few decades ago, somebody discovered that sowing the ponds with fish fry or fish eggs made their yields rise enormously. And that was a disaster for these communities because local landlords smelt these new profits and they drove the fishing families off the ponds. Most of the fishing families accepted their fate. Being lower caste in India, as I'm sure you know, is a series of violations of your rights, which seems to be one of the most appallingly unjust systems in the world. But a few young men stood up and protested, and they were beaten up by thugs hired by the landlords. At which point, the communities stood up and said, actually, this is not acceptable, and they started to organize. They found allies in the state government. India's a federal system, a fishing minister who had been from those communities, who helped pass a law that said that if you formed a cooperative, you could get rights to the ponds. And on the basis of that, they started to take over. When I first went there were about 100 ponds. I went back and the number had risen still further into community ownership. Now, what happened, if you look at it through Joe Rowland's framework, the power within moment came with those attacks on the young men in the communities, where people suddenly went, a light bulb moment, a switch was flicked, and they said, no, this is not right. Power with was both when they started to form organizations, and then when they found some individuals who were from the elite, from Brahmin in the area, who helped broker conversations with the police, with politicians, and were invaluable in terms of creating the campaign. That enabled them to achieve that power to influence legislation, and eventually they got the power over the ponds. It was a beautiful story. It really illustrated Joe Rowland's concepts, and I think I want to end there. Thank you.